After you complete the Path of Exile 2 campaign and enter the endgame, you begin interacting with the Atlas of Worlds. If you played Diablo, you can think of it as a little bit like rifts or pit levels. If you played Path of Exile 1, this is more or less maps, and if you've played Last Epoch, this is monoliths. But there's one slight difference. You access each of the areas through the use of Waystones, and Waystones come in 16 different tiers, with Tier 1 being the lowest, and Tier 16 being the highest and also incredibly rare and difficult to get. But since these Waystones are consumable, you need more of them to keep running the maps that you want. Now, Waystones drop pretty frequently at first. You're not really going to run into issues sustaining Tier 1, 2, or 3 Waystones, especially since, if you're really struggling, you can always go right here to Doryani, either in the Vaal Refuge or in your hideout, and you can purchase Waystones. He will sell an unlimited amount of Tier 1s, and he'll sell a pretty decent selection of Tier 2s and 3s as you progress through the early. But as you get into the later tiers, and especially as you are trying to progressively do higher tier Waystones, there's a few things you can do to ensure that you always have enough drops so that you can run more. And that's exactly what I'm going to go over in today's video, because especially as I started doing Tier 15s, I was really struggling to sustain. So I threw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall. This is what stuck, and I'm going to talk about both what I found to be helpful specifically for higher tier stuff, and also what I found to be helpful regardless of the tier. So, the first thing is adding modifiers to your Waystones. So if it drops like this, monsters deal 40% of damage as extra lightning, you aug it. Keep in mind, the suffix modifies Waystone drop chance, while also making it more dangerous. The prefix increases the loot, and in this case, increased number of rare monsters means there's a higher chance to get a good Waystone, because most of the good Waystones are dropped from rare and unique monsters as they have a higher level than the native zone. So if you're trying to go up in Waystone tier, you want to kill more rare and unique monsters. Which does bring me to the second tip, which is look out for bosses. So this area is absolutely chock full of bosses, and it is great for Waystone sustain, because I can kill a boss here, 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 and a boss here. At this point, I'm kind of just running all tier 15s because I am able to sustain. And I'm even starting to explore citadels and interact with the endgame experience. But before I was at this point, what I would do is run lower tier Waystones. So I'd put a lower tier Waystone, I'd run the tower, it's not particularly rewarding. Then I would use a tablet to add something like Breach that adds a lot of monsters that I can kill for Waystones, or that irradiates the zone, raising the level. Remember, the higher level the monsters, the more likely they are to drop a high level Waystone. So if you're adding +1 to the zone level, either by running something corrupted by the beast, or by irradiating it with a tablet, you're more likely to get your next tier of Waystones, or more likely to sustain the ones that you have. And then, as I'm running through, going from boss to boss to boss, I'm getting more and more Waystone drops, and this was very much what I was using to help stabilize my Waystones. Just doing this stuff honestly worked really, really well for all of my white maps and all of my yellow maps. But in red maps, especially as I was pushing towards tier 15, things got a little bit more complicated. Now, I'm next going to be talking about Atlas passives, and I'm going to talk about them in the context of sustaining Waystones, not particularly in the context of making money. But in the future, I am going to talk about how to use them to make money, so do be sure to get subscribed and ring that notification bell to see all future uploads. As you complete maps of a certain tier, you will get more and more Atlas passives from Doryani. And early on, these are crucial to sustaining your Waystones. So, the first thing that I would recommend is Constant Crossroads. Go here, you'll need to complete Tier 1 and Tier 2 maps to do this, and you get 20% increased quantity of Waystones found in your map. Already, this is a huge boon towards sustaining. But it gets better. After you complete Tier 3, and 4, and 5, you get the High Road, where they have a 20% chance to be a tier higher. So if you are currently sustaining Tier 5 and you want to move to Tier 6, having that 20% chance for any Tier 5 to turn into a Tier 6 makes sustaining them and progressing the tiers easier. Beyond that, there's more you can do. You could take a bunch of small nodes that have chance to be a tier higher. You could also increase the number of monsters in your maps. specifically more rare monsters, because rare monsters, again, are most likely to drop the best Waystones. And all of this works really well for an early game setup. But you might notice stuff over here that's a little bit different. Well, Deadly Evolution makes rare and unique monsters more dangerous by adding a modifier. But the modifier also increases the loot they drop. So you will get even better loot if you take Deadly Evolution, at least provided your build is able to handle it. And then the thing that, for me personally, really made the difference, it took me from, okay, I am struggling to sustain 14s and 15s, to I've got it no problem, was Corrupted Infusion. So, instead of just rolling all of my Waystones and then calling it good, what I would do is I'd transmute it, I'd make it blue, I'd aug it, I'd add a modifier, I would regal it and make it rare, like this, because each affix increases rewards, and then I would vol it. This changes it randomly. Sometimes this means your tier 15 becomes a tier 14, but sometimes your tier 15 becomes a 16. And after you volled it, you also get Corrupted Infusion, where it is effectively volled a second time as you run it, thus multiplying the rewards even more. I also found that as I progressed and as I killed bosses, I actually recently just killed a boss, so I can do this again, you get 2 Radiant Waystones. Once you have Radiant Waystones, map bosses have a 25% chance to drop a Waystone. So again, more map bosses means more Waystone drops. And after that, you can kind of go into whatever extra loot stuff that you want, though I would recommend going to Irradiated, because that increases the monster level by 1, again, not only increasing the general rewards, but making it much easier to sustain. So that's a little bit of what I've been doing to sustain my Waystones, and also get better loot from monsters. Now, especially if you're in the early mapping period, I don't think you need to do most of the things that I'm doing. For white maps, honestly, I found just kind of running them was totally fine without thinking about it, though I would strongly recommend always transmuting and augmenting all of the Waystones that you run. This is because transmuting and augmenting significantly increases the rewards. As you get into yellow maps, you want to start thinking about things like Atlas passives. You'll actually have gotten quite a few from running white maps, and they do provide a really big boost. Also think about doing towers and using towers to affect the maps around, either to raise the level, again, thus making it more likely that you will drop higher tier Waystones, or to add mechanics like, say, Breach that contain a lot of monsters, or Expedition that contain a lot of monsters, so that you can get more rares that, again, are the most likely monsters in your maps outside of bosses to drop Waystones. As you're doing this, you can always use your lower level Waystones, kind of clean out your inventory to clear out towers, they're not super rewarding, or clear out maps that don't have any mechanics on them. But then use your higher level ones on the maps with mechanics, because those will be packed full of rares, and of course, always use those on the bosses. But let's say you're doing all that and you're still not quite sustaining. You're really, really close though. One thing you can do is take a bunch of the spare Waystones that you don't need, go over to a reforging bench. It destroys 3 similar items to be reforged as a new item. But there's actually a hidden recipe here, where you can do tier 13, tier 13, tier 13, reforge, tier 14. 3 Waystones becomes 1 Waystone of a tier higher. So if you're very close, you have just a few too many 13s and not quite enough 14s, you can use the reforging bench to turn them into 14s. Now I wouldn't advise doing this with any Waystones which you are actively running, but if there's a tier that's just sitting in your stash tabs and taking up space and not providing any value, you should absolutely reforge them into something that you're able to use and going to run. But with all that said, Path of Exile 2 is a really new game, so there could be some cool tech that I've totally missed. If you have any cool tips for sustaining Waystones, do be sure to put them down in the comments below. Also, if you're looking for more Path of Exile 2 content, well, then you can check out a recent video I made about how to scale both your damage and defenses with Archmage, some of my frustrations about early access. I don't know how long that video is going to actually last in relevance, but hey, it was pretty fun to make for now. Or check out my last build update, where I was talking about my Cold Fireball Stormweaver endgame setup. I'll link to all of those up in the card and down below. With that, I'm going to get going for now. thank you very much for watching to the end. I'm glad you've enjoyed. Good luck on your map progression journey. May your Waystones be plentiful, and may you drop many, many Exalted and Divine Orbs. And hey, before I go, one last thing. Since you made it to the end of the video, why not leave a like and share it with a friend? Because that tells the algorithm to show this video to more people, which makes it far more likely that I'm going to be able to make more Path of Exile 2 videos in the future. So with that, I'm going to get going, but thanks for watching to the end. You're a real one, and I'll see you later.